कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी यादों में बरसातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें। मन की गहरी झील में कूद जाती हैं कभी, सोच के दरिया के संग संग बहती जाती हैं कभी। चाहे शाम हो या हो रातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें।
Hello, welcome to Kitaabnama. We will be in conversation today with Upamanyu Chatterjee, my favorite writer, and also one that many people have grown up reading and young people read. And in fact, his editor at the launch had said something that made perfect sense. She said, English August is a book which is in our DNA. But with every book, I think he's written, to me personally, a book stronger than his previous one. So we'll be talking about his latest. It's called Fairy Tales at 50. Upamanyu, I wanted to first ask you about this new novel with the title, because to me it seems the horrors here are almost all-consuming. Kind of all the world is in decay, which makes this title Fairy Tales at 50 interesting. Why the title Fairy Tales?
Fairy Tales at 50 is clearly meant to be ironic. 50 on the one hand is the comic fears of mortality, of growing old. And fairy tales, I imagine, symbolizes or represents all that the imagination can do, be it just storytelling, art, sculpture. There is a point at the end of the book where I do say something to the effect that human lives are precious only in fiction. That I think is essential to the understanding of the book. It's a way of shrugging off the fears of mortality, I think. That's one of the purposes of art. I mean, it sounds too grandiose, but that's the basis of what I was trying to do.
Every book that you write is, for me and other readers, new. Goes into, and yet at the same time, the universe in which you set your stories is the same. And always there is this refusal to look away from what you call in the book also the atrocities of the world. But at the same time, you keep returning to that, and fiction therefore always has been maybe a manner in which you make sense of life.
True, that's absolutely true. It does serve both a cathartic function, and it provides one a kind of magnifying glass to look at the world around one. At the same time, it's fun. I mean, it's meant to be fun. I find looking at the gritty side of life, ironically, both amusing and for the writer, for lack of a better word, a challenge. The concerns, I suppose, in it's been 6 books now. The concerns, I suppose, are the same because it's the same person who's writing the book. But at the same time, one moves on. Ideas change, develop. Points of view change, focuses change. So, yes and no, I guess. It's the same world, and I've been looking at different aspects of it differently.
While you are talking about the same aspects of existence, human existence, but I felt that in this novel, it was almost as if you had lost all fear of looking horror in the eye and showing your readers the true horror of life. It just took my breath away. Is there ever a point where you feel that you're going to lose your reader?
I suppose writers are very often asked this question. I mean, whom are you writing for? And I think the answer must be someone vaguely like myself. I mean, with a kind of sensibility that reads and thinks the way I do. I mean, I can't. There is cricket in this book, for example, but I can't write a book about, you know, a cricket fan or something. I mean, there are subjects that interest one, and there are subjects that just simply don't. I mean, the horror, you know, it's not about a concentration camp or something.
No,
I mean, at the same time, it's meant to be funny. I mean, it's one of the reasons why the idea of a fairy tale is useful, because it's immediately, you know, fairy tales are horrifying, but this helps you to immediately distance yourself from comically, you know, from a cannibal like the father, etc. But in fact, at the end of it, when the father dies, you actually, I miss him.
Yeah, he is quite a character. Pashupati, who's always the Lord.
He's the Lord of all creation. He's a horrible man.
And interestingly, his wife Manasa, again, which brings me to this, you know, Pashupati, Manasa, and of course Unruly. In all your books, you have actually played with philosophy, you know, Hindu philosophy, Hindu thought, and others. And here it begins with Unruly. So there's again this engagement with, or at least using of Buddhist and Hindu myth and fable. How important is that, you know, because humor is one, of course, and the Swift-like humor, which is completely compelling. And I know you laugh when we say it's black humor and you say black, but you know, so that's one aspect. And the other is this: using myth, using philosophy, using thought, and that is central to this book. So was Unruly where the character of Unruly was where this book began for you?
Well, yes and no. In fact, that's, you know, you've asked me several questions, so I'll take them.
Sorry.
Hindu and Buddhist myths, I think, you know, they are fascinating. So I'm not particularly religious, but myth, folktale, fairy tale, these three worlds are linked, even intellectually, and one slips quite easily, I think, from one to the other. All the cliches are true. There are these huge, very rich storehouses from which you can draw. That's one. I took, again, what is obvious, I took the cliches of fairy tales, of classic tales, stories available in all cultures, and played around with them in a realistic modern context. I mean, you take a witch and you take an ogre and you sort of place them in Bombay and see what you get. You take twins, you take, in fact, you know, you take a prince and a pauper. When I read, for example, Mark Twain, the prince and the pauper were just so boring. And I said, what a pity. I mean, here is literally a classic text, loved by generations of children. And both the rich kid and the poor kid are so boring. And I said, okay, here we go. That's it then. I made the poor kid a rural serial killer. Why not? And I could have not chosen Unruly. You could have picked some other, you know, I don't know, Eklavya. I mean, anything. But for some reason, Angulimal chose himself. He just fitted the role. He's just, contrary to the prince's comparative impotence, he's just very male. He's just, you know, violent, bloodthirsty killer, etc. So the contrasts set themselves up. You know, the rest, I keep coming back to this, the rest serves the functions of comedy. I mean, in fact, in our own fairy tales, the Rakshas is actually quite comic. He's always going ha 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 and eating, you know, 20, 30 people for breakfast and things.
Right.
That in no way is scary. I mean, it's just funny. I mean, So you take all that and you fool around, you put them in a modern context, see what you get.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It is a comedy. I mean,
I hope so.
No, it is a comedy. It's the blackest of comedies, but it is a comedy, and in fact, it's interesting because it defangs, in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
These utterly villainous characters, and Pashupati to me is the great ogre, and also Unruly in parts, not as much as the rest, but there is, through Unruly, I remember in one of the interviews that you recently gave about the book, you said how it was very important for you. I'm not sure if those are the words that you used, but Unruly had to die in the end. That in a kind was a resolution, in a sense, because he represented evil. Does he represent evil?
Yeah, absolutely. And at another point in the book, I do say that evil is more fundamental than the planet. I mean, there is no escape from it, and that it controls almost everything we do. It's a grim point of view, but facts bear us out. So at that one point, at the very end, in fact on the last page of the book, when fantasy world meets fact, Unruly is got rid of by an even greater evil. I mean, what the hell is a serial killer in front of a terrorist attack? I was in fact very, very apprehensive about that twist at the end of the tale. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Will people catch it? Is it the right way out? Like any person who deals with fiction, there are fascinating alternative possibilities.
Yeah.
In fact, I was so taken up myself with the half-death of Magnum, the Mad Sister. I said you could end there, a body in midair, not dead, but it's like calculus, towards zero, going to, but not because too precious to die. I thought we could leave it there, and you say that's the point of fiction. You sustain life through fiction, etc., etc. And I said, no, you have to round off everything. Just get rid of all of them. Yeah. Time will tell. I don't know, but at the end of it, I was quite satisfied. Also, there's a kind of poetic. It rounds off the book. Right. The Angulimal myth and his meeting with the Buddha. All that is taken care of. Right. But which is not, I mean, I've said this, it's not a religious text.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, I mean,
but I mean, I'm ethical and moral, so that universe is still ethical and moral. Bad people die and so on. But it's not a plea for.
And interestingly, yet, I mean, after all this, I remember the last line of the book. It says, namely that life, my lord, life is still a lotus. You talk about, it is an immoral universe, and you are writing about everything in a state of decay. What is the point of life? And then, about evil, and you're saying evil being fundamental to the universe. And yet you end the book with this.
Yeah, it's something I believe in. Other people say it throughout the book, that life can be horrible, but the alternative sounds like a Woody Allen line, but the alternative is much worse. And sometime when we leave Angulimal before he returns at the end of the book, he sees much the same thing in this pool of stagnant water outside Banaras he's waiting for. He sees lotuses growing out of the garbage of the area. Clearly, far too obviously symbolic, but that's it. Life is precious, even though it's just surrounded by filth and garbage. But it's what we have, it's what we make the best of. But at the same time, there's no message or anything. And in fact, if that's the last thing you think of before you copy it, it's a positive statement.
Yeah. No, I think, of course, we all read, our own kind of stories into a book.
Yeah, well, naturally.
And I think the triumph is really that it allows, at least me and many other readers, to do that. And therefore, that line really meant a lot. But in a sense, there is, as you said, throughout the book, you're merciless. I mean, there's no mercy when you. But at the same time, there are these, as you said, sentences, little messages, little images, and with that, with these meager things, it seems enough reading the book. Yes, life is, so that to me seems like a heroic thing to do, to say, evil is fundamental, the body is programmed to rot and decay, the world will decay, and yet there is.
Yeah, that's it. If you want to sum up the book, I think so. It's it's not. I imagine it's not a unique worldview, but that that's it. It's not. I mean, it's not even particularly. Though you might disagree, it's not even particularly bleak, but
right.
It's how we stand.
Bleak only in the sense, I suppose, when we're talking about books, as you said, summing up, which in itself is not a very praiseworthy thing to do, let's say. And one does tend to use easy words and be glib when you're talking about that. But I mean, it is impossible. It is impossible actually to talk about a book which is so rich and in a short discussion in a few sentences. But staying with this idea of lack of any other word, the little redemptions in the book, whatever. How important is the character of Nirib? Because again, in that same interview where you talked about Unruly and the evil being fundamental, you talked also about Nirib being really significant to the book, his filtering intelligence.
If you look at the rest of the characters, not you. I needed one of them to carry with him or her, the few ideas that there are in the book. I mean, if you take Nirib away, clearly there's this huge chunk that's gone. He is the one with he's the one with the thoughts of the decaying body, etc. He's also the one with intellect. I mean, I don't know. He's the one who reads and so on. I mean, and he's the one who makes sense of his experience. The others are, they just live, if you know what I mean. I mean, Angulimal is, in fact, his polar opposite.
Right.
But even his parents and his mad sister, they are, none of them is actually thinking or not, or cogitating about what it means to be alive and decaying.
Right.
That's him. At the same time, it's clear that the life he has lived has rendered him psychologically impotent. He can't do a thing, and the only time he acts over that landmine business is to save his own biological father. I mean, it's all that is perhaps even a little too schematic, but it's there. It's to have to plot the things so that there is some kind of pattern that emerges. So it's possible. I mean, he does act when he has to, but purposelessness has incapacitated him. He just can't decide anything. He's at the same time, it's comic.
No, it is interesting the point you made about a pattern, and then you make sense of it. Which brings me to something that you've always said is you like to tease your reader. You make demands of your reader. Why is that important?
Well, I like books myself that puzzle me a bit, because it's when if it's not particularly facile, or then it sticks in your head. You say, okay, this was weird, or why did he say that, or passages recur. You go back to some.
Right.
You read something else which says, oh, that book wasn't about this at all. It was about, books can be superficially easy and yet remain in your head. That granted. But yeah, I like books that would make some demands. I mean, would tease the reader with an image or a phrase, would not all of us can write like Agatha Christie.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, even though both I used to, well, I still do, both James Hadley Chase and Agatha Christie. If ever you're going to ask me about influences, I have none in the sense.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't.
But I used to be fascinated by these two in particular, because you can't put that book down. It's the early Agatha Christie and the early Chase. You can't put them down. And you say, how are they doing it? Okay, it's just the plot. It's also, particularly for Chase, it's the taut phrase, not a word wasted. But then you say, but you can't do it because there are other things that you want to put in. You want to reflect on mortality, or you want to add stuff. And the nice thing about writing a book, a long book as opposed to a short story, is that you have elbow room. You can, give yourself breathing space. All that goes into it, I think. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, it's the way I function. It's the way I work.
One last thing is, you said I wasn't going to, influences. No, I wasn't going to ask. But you said it. It reminds me there's Swift-like kind of humor that I think you do that, and humor is integral to your writing. But also, there's a tenderness about these characters. I mean, Nirip, yes, but also Shivani.
Yeah. In fact, I was I shouldn't be saying so. I was very happy with, or I am happy with the book, because I thought at last I've done two women whom I love. They are great. The two sisters, I thought. They work well together, and you keep thinking, how will a woman survive against an ogre? She'll tease him, she'll just play hard to get, she'll be 4 steps ahead of him mentally.
Right.
It's how women survive,
yeah.
In a violent, male-dominated world. I wish I could have done more with Shivani, though.
Next book. Please bring her back in your next book, because I really thought, she was probably my favorite character in the book. So, and I'm being told that I think we've used up all our time. But on that note, you may of course not bring her, but in some books, I think just please bring Shivani back.
I'll take your advice. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
In the Cultural Revolution, which started in 1966, my parents became victims, and they were exiled to the camps. In 1970, early 1970, I went to see them. I traveled for days to see them. And this is a passage about me visiting my mother. Here it is. I stayed 10 days and was to depart for my father's camp on New Year's Day. My nice truck driver was to pick me up where he had dropped me off. By the way, I had to hitchhike to my mother's camp. My mother's eyes moistened because although his camp was not far away, she and my father were forbidden to visit each other. I put the food basket on my back untouched. My mother insisted I take the whole lot to my father. Saving precious food for others has always been a major way of expressing love and concern in China. My mother was very sad that I was going, and kept saying she was sorry I had to miss the traditional Chinese New Year breakfast, which her camp was going to serve. Tangyuan, round dumplings symbolizing family union. But I could not wait for it for fear of missing the truck. My mother walked half an hour with me to the roadside, and we sat down in the high grass to wait. The sweep of the landscape undulated with the gentle waves of the thick Kogan grass. The sun was already bright and warm. My mother hugged me, her whole body seeming to say that she did not want to let me go, that she was afraid she would never see me again. At the time, we did not know whether her camp and my commune would ever come to an end. We had been told we would be there for life. There were hundreds of reasons why we might die before we saw each other again. My mother's sadness infected me, and I thought of my grandmother dying before I was able to get back from Ningnan, the place where I was exiled to. The sun rose higher and higher. There was no trace of my truck. As the large rings of smoke that had been pouring out of the chimney of her camp in the distance thinned down, my mother was seized by regret that she had not been able to give me the New Year's breakfast. She insisted on going back to get some for me. While she was away, the truck came. I looked towards the camp and saw her running toward me, the white golden grass surging around her blue scarf. In her right hand, she carried a big, colorful enamel bowl. She was running with the kind of carefulness that told me she did not want the soup with the dumplings to spill. She was still a good way off, and I could see she would not reach me for another 20 minutes or so. I did not feel I could ask the driver to wait that long, as he was already doing me a big favor. I clambered onto the back of the truck. I could see my mother still running toward me in the distance, but she no longer seemed to be carrying the bowl.